Hey, happy Monday, everybody. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Had some pretty crazy stuff for the third and final regional for Europe this weekend, as we have found our final 4 teams. They're going to be attending the major, which also gives us all of our matchups. OCE ended up wrapping up as well, so I will talk to you guys about the first round matchups in the major. We'll do breakdowns of those later in the week, but for now, we do have all of our teams attending the major. But before we get into that, we got to break down what happened this weekend, specifically in Fall Regional 3 or the Fall Invitational for Europe. Today's video we're going to do in 3 parts. Obviously, we're going to break down the Swiss as well as the actual like playoff situation, all the crazy storylines, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to try to do it as quickly as possible. And then at the tail end of the video is kind of the macro, hey, these are the matchups, these are the teams that are attending. This is some of the other stuff that went down through the scene. So we're going to try to crush through this as quickly as possible. So without any further delays, first things first, going into the Swiss stage, some pretty crazy storylines. Some things went as expected. Oxygen bounces back. K-Corp continues to be 3-0. And then outside of that, it's kind of chaotic. EG and Vitality both making it back through. There was a lot of concerns in my perspective of what I saw the previous week. Are we going to continue to see Vitality pushing through and playing up to their competition? Is EG a team that has the potential? And apparently so it is there, beating both Tundra, BDS and 5, and Vitality as well. So they got a little bit of revenge. So good to see some of those results. Oxygen's only wins came against teams that I think were kind of struggling. Team Liquid is a team that is kind of an anomaly for me. In their matches, they played G1, which they lost. Algeria, Quadrant, and BDS, they all win and go 3-0 in every single game, sweeping their competition in their wins. And then in the other games, like against G1 and Oxygen, where they lost, to me, they were the better team, but they kept throwing. Like, they kept doing things that were allowing the other teams to get back into it. It was really weird. And then the crazy turn of events, Solary also ends up making it through with a negative game differential. Just wild stuff across the board. Some big surprises. No Moist, no BDS, no Tundra, no Quadrant in the top 8. Some of the crazy things to think about. Williams Resolve was a team that made top 8 after playing in a tiebreaker for the last seed. They were 16th seed, technically tied in that kind of 3 teams trying to make 2 spot situation. So technically they were the 17th seed, and they made it all the way to top 8. Wild stuff. The previous world champs and current world champs in Team BDS also didn't make top 8, nor did they qualify for the fall major. 3 of the top 5 teams in the overall like point rankings, if you take BDS, you take Moist, you take Quadrant, Tundra, etc., the top 5 teams, 3 of them did not make top 8. Evil Geniuses, Williams Resolve, Vitality, or Team Liquid were guaranteed to make the finals due to the way that the playoff bracket looked. Like, the amount of things that went down, like, this was the most Europe-esque type regional I've ever seen, and it ended in similar fashion, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if you guys want to call it depth or inconsistency or whatever the summarization is, but a lot of these playstyles are set on a precedent of having to play perfect and really, really solid, and when those things go off, they tend to get punished. But there's some of these results where I'm just like, how are some of these teams losing to like 14, 13, 12 seeds when it should never happen? I don't know. It's wild stuff. Either way, you even see that with like Algeria. Algeria was a top 8, and then all of a sudden they go 0-3 and go out. So some things to take in consideration with a grain of salt is obviously a lot of pressure. A lot of teams playing for playoff spots, and that mentality and that stress can cause some issues. But there was quite a few teams that were also boot camping, Team Liquid being one of them, that it really paid off for. So that gives us our 8 teams, and hopefully you guys can't hear the planes that are flying over. The football game's about to start. They do like jets that fly past, so it's pretty loud right now in my apartment, and it's shaking. So hopefully you guys don't hear that. But 8 teams in order: K-Corp, EG, Vitality, Oxygen, G1, Team Liquid, Williams Resolve, and Solary. Going in the basic storylines for what was needed for playoffs. Team Liquid needed to continue to progress one step ahead of G1 was basically the conversation. For both Vitality, for Williams Resolve, for Evil Geniuses, for everybody else. Everybody basically wanted G1 to lose. So G1 ends up getting the upset immediately over Oxygen, which basically makes it a little bit tougher for everybody else. The bottom half of the bracket, EG versus Williams Resolve and Vitality versus Liquid, they needed basically to get to the grand finals now. So for Liquid, some of the conversations was like, if EG and Vitality both make to the semifinals, then their chances are over. Williams Resolve needed to get to the grand final. Like, there was a lot of leapfrogging going on, same with Solary, but realistically, there was 2 teams to pay attention to, which was Liquid and G1. As long as Liquid outperformed G1 by 1 spot, they were good. And that's exactly what happened. Results wise, some of the games were pretty dull. I did a watch party with Chrome, coach of SSG, and some were really exciting. Liquid completely bodied Vitality, and I say that in a really weird way because it felt like Liquid was a majority of the time in control. Like they looked like they were dominating the field, but then they would do these things and Vitality would get a freebie, or a weird challenge and pinch would go to the back of their net and it would keep it close. And that kind of shows in the series. 2-1, 2-1, 1-0, 2-1. And then game 4 was a 5-3 victory. They call a timeout, they still lose. So that one felt kind of odd. EG Williams Resolve was kind of just a battle of who cared. And it feels kind of disrespectful, but it's really weird to watch both these teams have some really big moments. But it was like, how do I say this? Like watching the two play felt as if they both were giving each other turns to get back into it. They were both giving each other turns to be like, no, you can win. It's fine, man. Like, we don't need to win. You can win. And I don't know. Like, credit to Williams Resolve. They had some moments, and there were some times where it looked like they should have been able to close it out. And then EG would be like, no, we are actually the better team. So EG making the semifinals is not something to slouch over. I do think they're a team that has that potential, but just haven't really been able to tie it together yet. But the series was close. Like, everything was a pretty one-goal game-esque, a lot of overtimes. Like, you're talking 1-0, 1-0, 2-0, 1-0, 2-0, 1-0. Like, it was a lot of nothing happened, and then someone would score eventually. It was a really weird feeling for a game. But EG does win it in 7. We then go to G1 Oxygen, probably my favorite series of Saturday. Was a pretty good fight. G1, eventually, their offense does remain true, which does create a little bit of chaos. The big conversation was Moist was guaranteed a tiebreaker with 22 points overall if one of these teams won, or if they made to the grand finals, then guaranteed. And they were kind of like sitting and waiting, but eventually they do end up clutching up and guaranteeing their spot after the semifinals. So Moist was pretty happy to see that happen. Otherwise, yeah, G1 Oxygen, I think was overall it was a fun game. You got to see quite a bit of offense from both sides. G1 put together a solid performance. I like the way that they work the field in their positioning. Defense has always been something that I've praised them for, but their offense really showed up this time around. So it was awesome to see them come together for that. Marked by 8, making the World Championship, his former team, or not the World Championship. Marked by 8 making the Fall Major while his former team does not. So crazy stuff there if that would happen, but they do fall short. K-Corp versus Solary, as expected. Solary did keep it close, which seems to be their thing. They had 3 one-goal games, 1-0, 1-0, and 2-1 in game 4. But K-Corp, as expected, does sweep that. K-Corp is the best team in Europe. There is no doubt about it. Semifinals, as expected. I expected Team Liquid in their mechanics to be too much for EG, and it is. They started looking a little bit more clean. They weren't making the same mistakes. Working in a couple demos here and there, but not as much as I think they could. But they kind of whittle down teams. They're overwhelming offense. They're challenging everything. They're constantly applying pressure. Eventually does bring teams kind of to their knees, and it just becomes like it's a long haul. It's just grueling having to go against that offense all the time. On the other side, G1, although the defense is good, K-Corp just a bit more creative. Some of the crazy pass plays where it's like guy comes off the sidewall, passes it infield, it passes back into a player, then it pinches in, and like ridiculous stuff that was going down. More of that kind of stuff. But K-Corp overall, Itachi still gets a lot of praise from me and his positioning and what he does, but Vatir really stepping up as well, which is good to see that the decision to change in that roster, leaving Moist and going over, has been rewarded. So pretty solid, I would say. K-Corp has shown consistency and is pretty much the only team doing that. They now have 3 top 2 finishes, which is impressive. Them and Gen G is kind of what I'm hoping for at the major, is those two playing each other. I would love to see those two battle on LAN. We then get to the grand finals, and this one was a battle. Went to 6, could have went to 7 easily. It ended in game 6 with a 2.5-minute OT where T-Liquid eventually does score. There was a little bit of hesitation, I think, at first, but as Liquid started to warm up into the series, that aggression, that of not being afraid to challenge everything, just kind of overwhelmed K-Corp. Against teams like that, you do have to work the field and do a lot of passing outside, but K-Corp likes to do the high-flying solo plays, which when Team Liquid is allowed to continue to play for aerial game, they can then go for the challenges consistently, and they kind of get into a groove. So against both these teams, I think they're both susceptible to the same thing, except for Team Liquid was kind of just feeling it on the weekend with the boot camp and everything else going in their favor. And then the ability to, and you did see them working a couple demos here and there, a couple chases in net that opened up some opportunities. Some really good 50s that just opened up a good shot from like the left side, and some pretty solid moments that you're probably seeing through the highlights. So Credit to Team Liquid. They went from being a team that made top 8 and then not making top 8 and then winning the whole thing. And this is the first time I think this roster has won a regional, just like Team Liquid in general, not just like this iteration of the roster, if I'm pretty sure. So they've been in the scene since 2020, and getting a victory has got to feel pretty good for the team. I just wish their socials would also do that rather than just retweeting one of their players. It's crazy you see how big some of these organizations are, like Team Liquid and FaZe and stuff like that. Their social media just doesn't really push or promote or do any of that kind of stuff, which is kind of weird to me. I would love for some of these bigger orgs to really show that support to their team, especially for Rocket League, because it does make a difference. You see it a lot more in NA than I think you do in EU, which is kind of weird. Maybe that's just my perception of it, but it just feels like even Team Liquid, FaZe, and a couple others just don't really push. K-Corp's kind of just like trying to hold that down, and I really look forward to how that team shows up on LAN with their section that they're dedicating to. That blue wall is going to be really cool to see. What does that mean now overall for the major? We do have our first round matches because OCE finished up late last night as well, or technically this morning when I watched. And it gives us our first round matchups, which I think is pretty cool because there's a couple of these that I think are significantly easier than others. Because the Liquid won the whole thing, they actually leapfrogged the standings and become the 2nd seed overall, which is insanity to me that they're able to do that. It pushes Quadrant down, and it also pushes Oxygen down. So the first round matchups that people need to pay attention to. K-Corp is going to be playing James Cheese over from APAC. Genji is playing Power from Oxygen. FaZe Clan will be playing Moist. Club will be playing Pioneers. I think that's a really fun match. You got Liquid versus Team Secret. Version 1, because of the tiebreaker for Team Liquid, pushes them against Quadrant. You've got Oxygen versus G2. Space Station and Falcons was the one that we knew. You then have that being the first round for the major, and then we go through Swiss, and based upon results and everything else with game differential, it's going to lead to some pretty interesting results. So I think Swiss is scary. At any time I look at Swiss and trying to get those wins, like, there is not an easy match. You look at how it is within regionals, now make that international. It's absolutely insane. So I, for one, really look forward to kind of seeing a recreation of the wildcard we got at the World Championship. But those first round matches are going to be nuts. A lot of excitement for Rotterdam. So we do have a few weeks to ourselves where we're going to take a sit back and relax. I'm going to try to do as much coverage and talk about these teams and give you some insight on how things are going. But $310,000 on the line at the fall major in Rotterdam should be a lot of fun. But that is going to do it for today's video. As always, appreciate you guys taking time to tune into the recap. Some pretty interesting results and some more like in-depth analysis, I think, over the next few weeks of things to look forward to and certain players to pay attention to for each of these rosters. Should be a lot of fun, and some other things to announce as well. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on it, like, subscribe, notifications. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.